Most people assume expensive things reveal wealth. The watch, the car, the vacation photos, proof that someone has made it. But here is the contradiction. Many genuinely wealthy people do not feel the need to display it. They drive ordinary cars. They live in modest homes. They wear clothes nobody would look at twice. They avoid the very symbols we associate with success. Almost as if displaying wealth and possessing it are two completely different pursuits. And here is the second, stranger contradiction. The desire to appear wealthy may actually be one of the biggest reasons people never become wealthy. Sit with that for a second, because it does not make intuitive sense. Should not wanting to look successful push someone toward the habits that create real success? Should not the two reinforce each other? Apparently not. And that gap between the appearance of wealth and the substance of it is where this entire story lives. Why does the brain crave visible status so badly, even when it works against long-term financial interest? Why do genuinely intelligent people who understand compound interest and budgeting perfectly well, still overspend on things they know they cannot afford? Why does looking successful so often take priority over actually being financially free? And why do the people who quietly have the most money often look like they have the least? These questions are not separate. They are symptoms of one psychological system running quietly in the background of almost everyone's financial life. And the numbers prove that this is not just a feeling. In the United States, the gap between income and wealth is enormous. According to Pew Research Center, upper-income households had a median net worth of about $803,400, while lower-income households had just $24,500. That means two people with very different financial realities can appear surprisingly similar from the outside. On paper, their financial reality can be worlds apart. Think about the car bought on a loan that stretches the monthly budget just a little too thin, chosen not for reliability, but for what it says in a parking lot. The designer bag that costs a month's rent, carried specifically in situations where other people will notice it. The house that is bigger than the family actually needs, picked less for the extra square footage, and more for the driveway it sits behind, and the neighborhood it announces. The lifestyle upgrade that arrives the moment a raise clears. The vacation that gets photographed more than it gets enjoyed. The newest phone, replacing one that worked perfectly fine, because the old one had quietly started to feel like evidence of falling behind. None of this is unusual. It shows up across nearly every income bracket. The specific purchases change. The underlying pattern does not. Part of the reason is that humans almost never judge their own success in absolute terms. Nobody wakes up and asks, "Do I have enough money to live the life I actually want?" Instead, the brain asks a quieter, more automatic question, "Do I have as much as the people around me?" Success gets measured against a reference group: neighbors, coworkers, old classmates. People encountered online rather than against some fixed objective standard. And because that reference group is never static, the target never holds still either. This is where two very different ideas start to split apart, even though they are usually treated as the same thing: looking wealthy and being wealthy. They feel identical from the inside. They are not. One is a performance, aimed outward, judged by an audience that is usually paying less attention than it seems. The other is a private financial reality, often invisible to everyone but the person actually living it. These two things can move in completely opposite directions at the same time, and very often they do. To understand why, you have to look at the reward system underneath the behavior. For most of human history, status was not vanity. It was survival. Higher status meant better access to food, allies, mates, and protection. Groups that could quickly recognize and reward status made faster decisions about who to trust, who to follow, and who to cooperate with. There was no time for a long audit of somebody's character. Visible signals had to do the job instantly. The brain that evolved under those conditions is the same brain making purchasing decisions today, except now it lives in a world of credit cards and social media instead of tribes and shared hunting grounds. Material possessions have simply become the fastest available shortcut for signaling that same status. And they work quickly because they are visible. The brain processes a luxury symbol almost instantly, with barely any conscious effort involved. A bank balance, by contrast, tells you nothing just by looking at someone. Visible signals require no interpretation and no trust. Invisible wealth requires both. That is why the emotional payoff of buying is so powerful. Buying something expensive delivers an immediate reward the moment of purchase. The compliment, the visible reaction from somebody else. Saving money delivers almost nothing in the moment. No applause, no dopamine hit. Just a slightly larger number in an account that nobody else will ever see. Debt makes the trap even more seductive. Debt does not buy luxury. It rents an identity. That is why borrowing can feel so powerful. It allows someone to project financial success they have not actually achieved yet. The same house, the same car, the same lifestyle, purchased with tomorrow's income instead of today's savings. It creates real psychological relief in the moment because nobody outside can tell the difference between money that is earned and money that is borrowed. And that indistinguishability is exactly the point. But the long-term cost is stress that compounds quietly in the background, hidden behind the very image it was used to purchase. People do not buy objects only. They buy identities. The watch is not really a watch, it is disciplined, successful, someone who has arrived. The car is not just transportation, it is powerful, respected, someone worth noticing. The bag is not storage, it is exclusive, tasteful, someone who belongs in certain rooms. Every purchase quietly gets translated into a story about who the buyer is, or more precisely, who they are hoping to become in the eyes of anyone watching. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If nobody else ever saw the purchase, no compliments, no photos, no subtle recognition from anyone, would it still feel just as valuable? For a genuinely large share of purchases, the honest answer is no. Strip away the audience, real or imagined, and the appeal quietly deflates. And that gap between an object's private usefulness and its public meaning is exactly where this psychology lives and does its quiet work. This is also where the cycle becomes so hard to break. The new car feels exciting for a few weeks, and then it becomes simply the car. The new apartment becomes normal. The new watch becomes background. This is hedonic adaptation in action. The internal bar resets almost immediately, which means the next purchase has to be slightly bigger, slightly brighter, slightly more expensive to create the same emotional effect. And because the relief is temporary, the brain starts chasing it again. That is how the loop survives. Not because each purchase is irrational in isolation, but because each one feels like a fresh decision. Nobody experiences the pattern as a pattern. They experience it as a series of perfectly justified choices, each one reasonable on its own, each one quietly reinforcing the next. When income rises, the pattern often gets worse. A raise does not automatically create wealth. For many people, it simply raises the budget of the performance. A better apartment, a newer car, nicer clothes, more convenient spending. A more expensive version of the same life. The financial world has a name for this: lifestyle inflation. Income goes up, but so does spending, and the gap between the two stays stubbornly small. That is why higher earnings alone do not reliably turn into higher net worth. Here is where the story becomes very visible in real life. Picture someone, call her Maya, who gets a promotion in her early 30s and, almost without noticing it happening, starts upgrading everything around her to match the new title, the car, the apartment, the wardrobe, the vacations, the restaurants she is suddenly the type of person who goes to. Nothing about it looks reckless from the outside. Nobody would call any single decision a mistake. It is just a slow, steady climb that keeps pace exactly with her rising income, so her savings rate never actually moves. She becomes richer on paper, but not freer in practice. A few years later, she is earning more than she ever imagined possible at 22, and somehow no closer to the freedom she originally wanted the promotion for in the first place. She is not careless. She is not foolish. She is simply playing a game whose rules she never consciously chose to play. That is the hidden cost of performing success. It consumes the very surplus that could have created actual freedom. Because real wealth is not about visible consumption. It is about options. Time, security, the ability to wait, the ability to say no, the ability to weather a setback without turning it into a crisis. And that is why genuine wealth often looks underwhelming from the outside. Not a costume and not a stereotype, but a set of behavioral tendencies that show up again and again among people who have built lasting wealth. Longer time horizons, a lower need for outside validation, a steady habit of protecting capital rather than displaying it, real comfort with delay. selective and deliberate spending, and investments that nobody else will ever see or know about. These are not moral virtues. They are psychological differences. A different relationship with the same reward loop. And here is the reversal worth sitting with for a moment. Often, the clearest signal of real wealth is the near total absence of any signal at all. Underneath all of this sits one real fork in the road, and everything else in this story eventually leads back to it. One path spends money to purchase appearances visible, immediate, judged constantly by an audience. The other spends money to purchase options instead: time, choice, security, and genuine control over one's own life. The first path is loud and attention-seeking by design, because that is the entire point of it. The second tends to get quieter the further it goes, precisely because real freedom does not need an audience in order to feel real. That is also why the freedom path is so rarely celebrated. Nobody applauds an unspent dollar. Nobody compliments a maxed-out retirement account or a debt that was never taken on. The rewards of that path are real, but they are deferred, private, and almost entirely uncelebrated in the moment. Which is exactly why so few people choose it. So why does appearance feel so rewarding in the moment? Because status once meant literal survival, and the brain never got the memo that the rules of the game have changed. Why does the comparison never seem to stop, no matter how much someone earns? Because the reference group keeps moving, so the finish line keeps moving with it. Why does genuine wealth so often stay hidden from view? Because once someone stops needing outside recognition, they naturally stop needing to broadcast anything at all. Which leads to the real insight sitting underneath everything else in this story. The true opposite of looking wealthy is not looking poor. It is no longer needing outside evidence of personal worth in the first place. Picture walking into a room where absolutely nobody knows your income, your job title, your car, or your address. Nobody in that room is impressed. And nobody is unimpressed either, because none of it is visible to anyone, including, for a moment, yourself. Who would you still be in that room with none of it to lean on? That is the real question sitting quietly underneath every purchase, every comparison, every small moment of insecurity that this entire system has been built to run on. And genuine wealth, the kind that actually holds up over a lifetime rather than just a season, tends to begin exactly there. The moment identity finally stops depending on being perceived as wealthy at all.